That's one way, and the other way is you can use a git clone command, right? So git init is if you want to use your existing directory and you want to convert that to a git repository, a git local repository, we can make use of your git init. And if you already have a project, an existing project, and you just want to contribute to that, then you can make use of your git clone command, right? So we looked at both of them. Um, and then we also discussed about your different stages we have. So you have the working area. So working area is where we make the changes. We have the staging area. So staging area is like telling my Git that okay, these are my final changes. And then we have the local repository. So whenever your data is ready and if you want to commit those changes, so committing is nothing but if you want to save those changes, we go ahead and commit that, which is saving the changes in the local repository, right? So we discussed about those things, and we also looked at how you can check the status of your files, whether how do you know if your data is in the staging area or it is in the working area. So we have this git status command which can be used for that purpose. And then we looked at how you can move the data from one area to another area, that is from your working area to the staging area, how you can move the data. So what is the command for that?
Git add.
Git add,
Git.
right? So git add can be used whenever you want to move the data from one area to another area, which in this case is your the working area to the staging area. We make use of your um, git add command for that. All right, so we looked at that as well. Um, and then we looked at your git status short command. So there are a couple of ways you can use the git status command, which gives you like too much of information. And if you don't want so much of information, you can use the short status as well, which is git status hyphen yes or git status hyphen hyphen short, which will show you only that also shows you the status, but it's more like in a trimmed way that it shows you that information. So that is where we had stopped. The next thing we are going to talk about is your ignoring files. Now, by default, what happens is your Git will track all the files, okay, irrespective of the extensions, irrespective of the uh, type of files you are creating, no matter what it is, your Git will track those files. Now, in some cases, you may want to ignore certain type of files. For example, maybe it's a temporary file or it's a log file, and you don't want Git to track those files. Or could be, let's say you have a Python file. It's a test experimentation that you're doing, and you don't want Git to track those files. So we can tell Git to ignore those files. That's where we can utilize this ignoring files concept, where we can tell Git to ignore certain type of files, right? So instances. So let's go to this instance and let me log into that.
Rabi, I had one question.
Yes.
So whenever you create a repository on the local machine, so I mean, like, not using the GitHub, like, when you use Git and then you create a repository, so how do you make it available it for me? Like, for just like this, like the central server, like, we
Yeah.
have to use GitHub itself, or like, is there any option to share that repository without using GitHub?
I mean, see, you need to have a central repository. If you want to share with other people, you will need to have a central repository. Now, GitHub
Okay.
is one of the option you have. So, basically anything that is over the internet, right? You need something that is over
Okay.
the internet. Only then you will be able to share it. If not, you won't be able to share it.
Okay.
Uh, because if you're creating a local repository, unless you give access to your machine, no one will be
Okay.
able to use that.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
So the like one more question. So there are three stages, right? Like working area, staging, and committed area. So when we enter a commit, like git commit, so it moves it makes the changes. Also, it moves the file from staging to committed area, right?
Correct. Correct. So what it will do is it will basically save those changes in your local repository.
Okay, okay. Also, like, for committed area, do we have any specific color? Like, in the last session, you told us, like, working area and the staging area, we have red and green color. What about the committed area? Does it have any specific color?
No, but if you run, let's say, okay, let me show that flow to you. So I'll create one file over here. So let's call this index.html file. So git status. So it says that my data is in the working area. Now I'll do a git add. So this will move my data to the staging area, and then I will do a commit. So let's say draft. And at this point, if I run the git status again, you will see that nothing to commit, working tree is clean. This means you don't have any changes. All the changes have been committed in your local repository.
Okay, got it. So it doesn't basically have any specific color like blue and all.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It does not have an explicit way to tell that, okay, your change has been committed. Whenever you see this something like, you don't have anything to commit and your working tree is clean, that means your changes have been committed.
okay, okay. So what about the codes like we use like for example like in the file starting it used to say a like m question mark. I mean.
Yes. That is again for the staging area.
Okay, okay.
So,
That is explicitly for
yes.
staging, not for others area.
Yeah, yeah. Correct. Staging area or your working area. So basically, this is, I mean, see, git status, you can run it two ways. You can simply run git status. The other ways you can use this -s flag. It is basically telling you, you just give me the short output of it. So if you see, when I ran the git status, it gave me all this information.
Correct.
Now, when I ran the git status -yes, now -yes, which stands for short, that is telling me that okay, this is all unnecessary information. I won't be showing you this all these things. But now let's say if I create a file, I'll create a terraform.pl, and now if I run the git status without the short flag, it will show you this one. So it is telling me clearly, it is telling me that okay, there's an untracked file and this is the name of the file. Now, if I run this with a short flag, what will happen is it won't give me this detailed information. All
Okay.
right, it will simply give me this double question mark. And if you have that experience, then you will know that double question mark means it's an untracked file, and this is the name of the file. And you can also see the color. That means
Okay.
it's your working area. And if I move this to, let's say, the staging area, if I refer on the status once again, I can see the color has changed, green color, right? And your file name. So A means your data has been moved to the staging area now.
Correct. Got it.
Any other questions?
No, Ravi, all good.
I mean, so with essentially, say with this, you will get comfortable with all of these things once you start, running those commands, experimenting with that. You will start understanding those things. But generally, at an organization level, at least I don't use a short flag. I will just go with this git status, and whatever output I get, I'm happy with that. Okay.
Thanks, Ravi.
Yeah. The next thing we have is your ignoring files. So like I was telling, by default, what your Git will do is Git will track all these files. Okay. By default, Git does not, ignore any of the files, no matter what type of file you're creating. It could be a document, it could be a PPT, whatever it is, Git will track all the files. Now, in some cases, there might be a case where you want to ignore certain type of files. So basically, you don't want Git to track certain type of files. In that case, you can make use of this ignoring files. So often you will have a class of files that you do not want Git to automatically add or even show as being tracked, dragged or undragged, whatever it is. So basically, you don't want Git to even look at those files. You just want Git to ignore those files. Now, these are generally automatically generated files. So it could be your log files, it could be your files produced by your build system, any files. For that, you will be creating a file with the name dot git ignore. Okay, so first, with this step one will be to create a file with the name dot git ignore, and inside that file you can specify what you want to ignore, and Git will start ignoring those files for you. So let's say, for example, give me a moment. Hmm. So now here I'll create a file with the name .get ignore. Okay, that's your step one. And inside this file, you can specify what you want to ignore. Now, let's say, for example, I have a file with the name output.log. All right. Now, by default, Git will track all the files. So, irrespective of the type of files you have, Git will track all the files. Now, let's say I don't want this to happen. I don't want Git to track this file, this particular file, or any file that is ending with the .log extension. So I can create a file with the name .getignore and I can specify that. So star.log. So star here is a wildcard. I'm telling anything that ends with .log, ignore them. You can also explicitly give the file name, the specific file name that you want to ignore. You can do that also. You can make use of your wildcards. That's totally up to you. Now I will save this file. And now if I run this git status, you see that it is tracking this .get ignore, but now it is not showing me this output.log. So now it is ignoring any file that is ending with your .log extension. All right. So like this, if you want to ignore any files, you can make use of your .get ignore. So git will start ignoring those files for us. Questions?
No, Ravi.
No.
Okay. So in this case, the first example, the first line tells Git to ignore any files ending with .o or .a, right? And the second line tells Git to ignore any files whose name end with the tilde symbol. So examples, and but you can use it however you want it. Now, the next thing we are going to look at is committing your changes. So we've looked at how you can, create your data, how you can move the data to the staging area. The next step would be to commit your changes. So once you are ready with your changes, so let's say here, I have all my data in the working staging area. So this means my data is ready. All right. This is the final change, and I would like to commit this change. That's where you have committing your changes. So now that your staging area is set up the way you want it, you can commit the changes. So remember that anything that is still unchanged, any files that you have created or modified that you haven't run git add on since you edited them won't go into this commit. So very important point to remember here is, so I told you that you have your three stages, right? So you have the working area, you have the staging area, and then you have your local repo. Now, let's say in the working area, you have few files. Let's say index.html, and then let's say python.py. And then in my staging area, I have, let's say, terraform.tf, and then let's say index.js. Now, whenever I do a commit, your commit will only look at your staging area, right? Whatever data you have in the working area will stay in the working area only. Git will not look at those files. Git will not save those files. Git will only save the files that you have in your staging area. So unless you don't run the git add command, anything that you have in the working area will not be committed. So they will stay as modified files on your disk. So as long as they're in the working area, they will stay in the working area only. So let's say the last time you ran git status command, you saw that everything was changed, so you are ready to commit your changes. Now the simplest way is to simply run this git commit command. So at any point when you want to save your changes, you want to commit your changes, you can simply run this git commit command. Now what this will do is this will prompt you for a message. So committing is nothing but you want to save your changes. So you can either run this git commit message, or you can also pass this -m flag inline. So passing a message is mandatory. Now, why do we need to pass a message? Now, I am a developer. I know why I'm making this change. Right now, I know why I'm making this change. But maybe after a month, if I come and look at it, I may not remember why that change was done or what was the purpose of that change. Or if someone else looks at that change, how will they know why this particular change was done, or for which ticket this particular change was done? How do we get to know that? That's where your message is mandatory over here. So every time you're committing your changes, you need to pass your message. It could be anything, something like, okay, fixing bug XYZ, or making changes for ticket 123, or making cosmetic changes. It should be a meaningful, short description about the change that you have done. All right. So here we will use this. So before I run that, you can see here, I have two files which are ready to be committed, right? So let's commit this, and let me call this as new files. Hit enter and done. Now, remember in the last session we spoke about your identity, right? Setting your identity. Now in this case, I have not set my identity. So you can see here, your name and email address were configured automatically based on the username and host name. So please check whether they're accurate or not. So because I'm running this on an EC2 instance, it has automatically taken my user EC2 details. But because I have not set my username and email address, it is prompting me for this. Right? So basically it is not using the right information. So it is using this as a username and it is using this as an email address, which is not the right information. So this is where setting your identity is very important. All right. In this case, I've not set the identity. The instance that I had used in the last session, I've destroyed it. So I don't have the identity now. Okay. And now my changes are committed. So now if you look at the Git status, you can see nothing to commit, working tree is free. So we made the change, we moved it to the staging area, and now we have committed it to the local repository. So for that, we make use of your git commit command. So remember that the commit records the snapshot you set up in a staging area. Anything you don't stage is still there, sitting there modified. You can do another commit to add it to your history. Questions?
No, Ravi.
No, Ravi.
Okay. Next is checking your commit history. Now, at any point, now, let's say you have commits, right? Like imagine you have done 10, 20, 30 commits. Now you want to see a history, or you simply want to see a history of all the commits that has been done in your project. Like, let's say we three are working, right? Now maybe you're curious to know what all changes that has been done for a particular project, or what all changes that we have done in this particular project. To get to know that, we can use this viewing commit history, which can be used to basically see the history of your commits. What was the commit done, when the commit was done, who made that commit, what is the change in that commit, all that information we can see. So after you have created several commits, or if you have cloned a repository with an existing commit history, you will probably want to look back to see what has happened. So maybe it's an existing project and you just want to understand the flow as to, when this project was created, what all files has been added to the project, when the files were added. You want to see that history. You can do that. So the most basic and powerful tool to do this is your git log command. So one simple command you have is using this git log command. So if I go to my local repository and if I run this git log command, I get to see my history. As of this moment, for this particular repo that I'm working with, I have 3 commits. Okay, so at the top you will have the latest commit, at the bottom you will have the oldest commit. All right, so in my case here you can see, now every time we commit our changes, there is a commit ID that gets generated. Now what is your commit ID? Commit ID is simply your reference. See, your Git is storing you the versions of your files, right? Like you also need to have a unique identity, a reference number, using which Git can understand who made this change, when the change was done. So it uses this his commit ID, also known as your hash value or SHA value. You can call it whatever you want. Okay. Then You can see the author. So author is who made this change. So this repo that you see here, this was created on the GitHub repository. So that's why this is the GitHub username, and then it is pointing this github.com, meaning this was created from GitHub. When this was done, so this was done on Monday, August 7th, on this date and time. And what is the commit message? This is the commit message we have given. Make sense?
So what is that head to main and then origin main and origin head?
Yeah. So origin is basically your we will talk about your origin in later on, but origin is used to specify the remote reference. So we'll talk about that later on. Main is your branch, on which branch this change was done. And the head, so in Git we have something known as your head and tail. All right, so head is the top, tail is your bottom. Again, we'll talk more on that in some time, but yeah, for now just hold on to that. Okay. And then you have this second commit. This is a second commit. Again, the commit ID. Who did this commit? When this commit was done? And what is the commit message? And this is the latest commit we have. So your latest commit will always show your head and the branch name. So head means this is the latest commit and this is your oldest commit. So again, who did this commit? When this commit was done? And what is the commit message? I can obviously go and see the changes you have inside this commit, but this is at a very high level as to how many commits has been done in this project, who has made these commits, when this commits was done, why this commit was done. All that information will be available. By default, with no arguments, git log lists the commits made in that repository in the reverse chronological order. That is, the most recent commits shows up first. So at the top you'll have the latest commit, and at the bottom you will have the oldest commit. Okay. Now the command lists each commit with its SHA1 checksum, the author's name, the email, date written, and the commit message. So every commit will have your SHA value, the author name and email, the date and time, and the commit message. Now a huge number and variety of options to the git log command are available to show you exactly what you're looking for. So by default, when you run this git log command, it will show you all these things. Now there are a few arguments and parameters that we can pass. Okay, so one of the helpful option we have is this -p or -- patch. Now essentially what this command will do is, so what this will do is, along with your commit history, it will also tell you the changes that you have done inside that commit for that particular commit. Okay, so again you can see the commit ID, the author, the date and time, the commit message, and the changes. So if you see minus minus minus, that means we have deleted some files. If you see plus plus plus, that means we have added some files. So this is the file I added, dot get ignored, and inside that file I've added this change, which is star.log. So it was a new file that we created. Then the next is there was a new file created, index.html file. So again you can see it's a new file mode. That means a new file was created. Then here you can see this readme.md. Again it says new file mode. That means a new file was created. And inside that file, these two changes were added. Now let me show once again. So now let's take this index.html file, and let's say this is a test change. I'll save this and let me add this and let me commit this. So let's say we'll call this as test change. So I've committed my changes. Now if I look at the git log command, you can see here the test change, it is showing over here. And if I use this git log hyphen p, it will also show me the change I have done in that particular commit as to what all modifications or additions you have done. All that information will also be available. Questions?
No, all good.
All good, Rob.
Okay. Now you can also limit the number of commits that you want to show. By default, it will show you all the commits. But let's say you want to see only the last two commits or the last one commit. You can make use of this number to specify. So let's say I'll say git log hyphen 2. So this will only show me the last two commits. Likewise, I want to see the changes that we have been done in the last two commits. So it will limit it to that number. So this option shows the difference introduced in each commit. You can also limit the number of log entries displayed, such as using -2 to show only the last two entries. So, again, you just want to see the last few commits. In that case, you can specify the number. So this option displays the same information, but with a difference directly following each entry. And this is very helpful for code review or to quickly browse what happened during a series of commits that a collaborator has added. You can also use a series of summarizing options with GitLog. For example, if you want to see abbreviated stats for each commit, you can use this hyphen stat option. So, see, there are a lot of options available. So this is another option you have. So this is your abbreviated stat. So basically, this will be the same information, but in addition to that, it also specifies the files. So index.html file, there was one change. So one file changed, there was one insertion. For this particular commit, we had .gitignore file, and then we have the terraform.tf file. We had some change in the .gitignore file, no change in the terraform.tf file. So two files changed, one insertion. Likewise, for the next commit, we have index.html file. We did not do anything. So one file change, zero insertions, zero deletion. So again, this will have some more details about you. So as you can see, the hyphen stat option prints below each commit entry a list of your modified files, how many files were changed, how many lines in those files were added and removed. It also puts a summary of the information at the end, right? It will have that as well. So another useful option is hyphen pretty. So this option changes the log output to formats other than the default one. A few pre-built options are available for you. So let's say you want to print all the commits in one single line. So here you can see this is showing you the commits in multiple lines, right? Now you want everything in one single line. Then I can say git log hyphen pretty is equal to one line. So it will have everything in one single line. But again, you can see it won't show us all the information. It will only show some of the information, meaning the commit ID, the branch, the commit message. This is another option you have. Then another option we have is your format. Okay, so format can be used if you want to display a customized commit output. Okay, which allows you to specify your own log output format. So if you want to have your own log output format, you can make use of this option. So this is especially useful when you're generating output for machine parsing, because you specify the format explicitly. It won't change with updates to Git. So something like this one. So git log -fn pretty is equals to format. Okay. Now with this format, we will need to specify what is the format of data you want to see. So I'll explain about these options, but percentage h, percentage an, then percentage ar, and then percentage s. Now, essentially, now here we are giving the customized output format. So the commit ID hyphen user, when this commit was done, and what is the commit message. Okay. If you want to customize it, you can customize it by using this format flag. Now, you will get all of this information from your help. Okay, if you go to the help, you can find all of this information. So let's say I will go to one moment. So here, if I say git log hyphen hyphen help, it's there somewhere here at the bottom. Let me show you. Okay, so that's your formats. Okay, here, this one. Yeah, this is what I was using. So I have used percentage H, right? So here percentage H, that's your abbreviated commit hash. Then I used percentage AN, which is your author name. Then percentage AR, which is uh, author date relative. And then finally percentage S, which is subject. You can use any of these things if you want to print the output, the commit output in your own custom format. So there are many more options available with your git log, so you can use whatever you want. Questions?
No, Rafi.
No, Ravi.
Next, we are going to talk about limiting your log output. Now, Git also takes a lot of useful limiting options that let you show only a subset of commits. So like basically trimming down your output format. Okay, so we have already seen one such option, which is a -2 option, which displays only the last two commits. In fact, you can do hyphen n, any number you want, you can give. So other time limiting options such as hyphen hyphen since and hyphen hyphen until are very useful. So maybe you want to see all the logs from the last 2 weeks or last 1 week or something, you can do that. Or you want to see the logs until a certain number of date, you can do that. Okay. Next is undoing things. Now, what is undoing things? Undoing things can be used whenever you want to revert your changes. So at any stage, you may want to undo something, right? You will obviously have this situation wherein you want to revert something, right? Revert your changes. Here, we will review a few basic tools for undoing your changes. So be careful. You cannot always undo some of these undos. And this is one of the few areas in Git where you may lose some work if you do it wrong. So you'll have to be careful with this. If you don't, handle this very carefully, there are chances you may lose your data. Now, one of the common undos takes place when you commit too early or possibly forget to add some files or you mess up your commit message. So something like, let's say, this is a incomplete change. And then let's say this file should also be committed. Okay. Now here I have two files. Now, let's say accidentally I did this, meaning I have only added the index.html file and not the terraform.tf file. Also, my index.html file does not have the complete change that I want. And by mistake, I went ahead and committed it. So let's call this as incomplete change. By mistake, let's say I went ahead and did this. So I forgot to add this and commit. And I also committed a file which was incomplete. How do we handle this? That's where we can make use of this. So if you want to redo that commit or make the additional changes you forgot, stage them and commit again using this hyphen hyphen amend flag. So what I can do is I can now see every time you commit, what will happen is it will generate a commit ID. Now in this case, let's say I don't want to generate a new commit ID. I want to use the last commit itself and add my forgotten changes to the last commit. So now here what I can do is, let's say I can go and let's say this is the complete change. So now again before that, let it be here. So now I will add all the files. Okay, so I have both the files, and I'll simply run this git commit hyphen hyphen amend and your message as well. So something like adding missing files. Now when you run this, what will happen is it will take the last commit, replace that with the new commit. So now if I run this git log, you see here this one, which is ending with 009E. I don't have that. So now this commit has been replaced with this commit. I mean, see, this has added a new commit, but now it does not have a history of this, right? So this can be useful when you don't want to answer unnecessary questions, like your maybe your TL will like, let's say you have a very I mean, I shouldn't be telling, but let's say you have a very micromanaging team, right? They track everything as to why this was done, why you forgot, how can you forget. I mean, to avoid all these sort of questions, we can do this so that you have a clean history. So instead of showing this, telling you forgot something, you have done an incomplete change, you can have a clean history by making use of this git commit hyphen hyphen amend. So you can use this with anything, not only for the changes. Maybe let's say you wanted to change this commit message. So maybe you gave ticket 1, 2, 3, 4, but your actual ticket is 2, 3, 4, 5. I just want to change that commit message. I can do that. So I can say git commit hyphen hyphen amend, and then I can say something like, let's say ticket 1, 2, 3, 4. And what this will do, this will only change the commit message. I mean, if you had any changes, it will take those changes. But if it does not have any change, you are just changing the commit message. That's it. So this command takes a staging area and uses it for the commit. If you have made no changes since your last commit, then your snapshot will look exactly the same, and all you will be changing is your commit message only, nothing else. So the same commit message editor opens up, but it already contains a message of your previous commit. You can edit the message the same as always, but it overrides your previous commit. As an example, if you commit and then realize that you forgot to stage the changes in a file you wanted to add to this commit, you can do this. So let's say you did a git add and then a commit, and then you realize you've forgotten something. Again, make the change, do a git add, and then run this git commit command with this hyphen hyphen amend flag. When you do this, you will end up with a single commit. The second commit will replace the result of the first. Questions?
No, Ravi. Understood.
No, Ravi, understood.
Okay. Next is unstaging a staged file. Now, let's say I don't have anything. Let's say we'll go to this file. Now, let's say I will do a git add. Okay, so now you'll see that the file is there in my staging area. You want this file back in your working area. So you have some more changes that you want to do to this file, and you want this file back in your working area. That's where unstaging a staged file can be used. So the next two sections demonstrate how to work with your staging area and working area changes. The nice part is that the command you use to determine the state of these two areas also reminds you how to undo changes to them. For example, let's say you have staged two files and want to commit them as two separate changes, but you accidentally typed git add and staged them both. So let's say accidentally You have staged both the files, but you want this to be part of one commit and this to be part of another commit, right? So you want them in two separate commits. For that, how do you unstage one of the two? The git status commands reminds you. So this git status command will tell you how you can unstage your files. So you can see here git restore hyphen stage the file name to unstage, meaning move the data from the work staging area to the working area. So here I can say git restore hyphen stage and then my file name. What this will do is this move the file from my staging area back to my working area. And now when I commit, only this file will get committed. Like this, at any point, if you want to unstage a file, you can do that. Questions?
No, Ravi.
Okay. Then next is unmodifying a modified file. Now there might also be cases where you have made some changes, but then you no longer want those changes. Maybe it is creating some bug or it is not working as expected, and you no longer want those changes. So you can go ahead and revert your changes at any point you want. Okay, that is possible. So, what if you realize that you do not want to keep your changes to a particular file? So, again, let's say this file itself, I do not want this change. Okay, so I made some changes. We added to the staging area. Now you realize that, oh, I don't want this change. Whatever change I've done here, I don't want it. I no longer want that. How can you easily modify it or revert it back to what it looked like when you last committed the file? So now you want to go back to the last version, right? You don't want the change. Whatever changes you have done, you don't want it. You no longer want it. You want to go back to the last version. How do you do that? That's where, luckily, the git status tells you how to do that too. So under the unstaged area, changes not staged for commit, it will show you. Okay, now so first you'll have to get this back to your staging area. So I'll say git restore hyphen staged and let's say terraform.tf. And here when you run this git status command, it will tell you how you can discard changes, how you can revert. So now whatever the changes you have here, you don't want that change, you want to go back to the previous change. So I can simply say git restore and then the file name. So now whatever I have done will be gone. So you can see it does not have this another change. It does not have this one. It only has the first line. That's your reverting your changes. Now it is important to understand that the git restore file is a dangerous command. Any local changes you made to that file are gone. So any local change you have done, it's completely gone. You cannot get it back. Now essentially what git is doing here is git just replaces that file with the most recent committed version. So here in the git log, whatever the recent version you have, git will take that file and replace it with the modified file. So it will simply delete this file and replace it with the committed file you have. That is what it is doing. So do not ever use this command unless you absolutely know that you do not want those unsaved local changes. Questions?
No, Ravi.
Yeah.
No, Ravi.
All right. I think that should be sufficient for today. In the next session, we'll talk about your remotes. And then we'll also look at how you can push your changes to the central repository. We'll cover all those things, okay? Cool. Thanks, guys. I'll see you on Monday then.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.